A Peace People Guide. Chapter 1. Some Peace People. Mohandas or Mohamdas Gandhi, 1869–1948. Mahatma Gandhi was the leader of the Indian independence movement and pioneer of peaceful revolution. The International Day of Nonviolence is observed on Gandhi's birthday, October 2. Mohandas Gandhi led peaceful marches through India to protest British rule. He was the guy who started peaceful revolutions in the modern era. GandhiInstitute.org, MK. Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence. GandhiSurvey.org, Mahatma Gandhi Research and Media Service. Mahatma Gandhi Peace Quotes. Mahatma Gandhi was the leader of India's peaceful revolution for independence from its colonial master, Britain. Here are some of his quotes. A coward is incapable of exhibiting love, it is the prerogative of the brave. A man who was completely innocent, offered himself as a sacrifice for the good of others, including his enemies, and became the ransom of the world. It was a perfect act. A no uttered from the deepest conviction is better than a yes merely uttered to please, or worse, to avoid trouble. A religion that takes no account of practical affairs and does not help to solve them is no religion. A small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history. An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. An unjust law is itself a species of violence. Arrest for its breach is more so. Anger is the enemy of nonviolence and pride is a monster that swallows it up. Before the throne of the Almighty, man will be judged not by his acts but by his intentions. Each one has to find his peace from within. And peace to be real must be unaffected by outside circumstances. Even if you are a minority of one, the truth is the truth. Faith is not something to grasp, it is a state to grow into. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win. Gentleness, self-sacrifice, and generosity are the exclusive possession of no one race or religion. God sometimes does try to the uttermost those whom He wishes to bless. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Healthy discontent is the prelude to progress. Honest disagreement is often a good sign of progress. I am prepared to die, but there is no cause for which I am prepared to kill. I believe that a man is the strongest soldier for daring to die unarmed. I cannot teach you violence, as I do not myself believe in it. I can only teach you not to bow your heads before anyone even at the cost of your life. I claim that human mind or human society is not divided into watertight compartments called social, political, and religious. All act and react upon one another. I have nothing new to teach the world. Truth and nonviolence are as old as the hills. All I have done is to try experiments in both on as vast a scale as I could. I know, to banish anger altogether from one's breast is a difficult task. It cannot be achieved through pure personal effort. It can be done only by God's grace. I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary, the evil it does is permanent. I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. If I had no sense of humor, I would long ago have committed suicide. If we are to teach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. In prayer it is better to have a heart without words than words without a heart. Increase of material comforts, it may be generally laid down, does not in any way whatsoever conduce to moral growth. Intolerance betrays want of faith in one's cause. Intolerance is itself a form of violence and an obstacle to the growth of a true democratic spirit. I shall not fear anyone on earth. I shall fear only God. I shall not bear ill will toward anyone. I shall not submit to injustice from anyone. I shall conquer untruth by truth. And in resisting untruth, I shall put up with all suffering. It has always been a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings. It is any day better to stand erect with a broken and bandaged head than to crawl on one's belly, in order to be able to save one's head. It's the action, not the fruit of the action, that's important. You have to do the right thing. It may not be in your power, may not be in your time, that there'll be any fruit. But that doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your action. But if you do nothing, there will be no result. Justice that love gives is a surrender, justice that law gives is a punishment. Let the first act of every morning be to make the following resolve for the day. Let us all be brave enough to die the death of a martyr, but let no one lust for martyrdom. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Love is the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable. Man becomes great exactly in the degree in which he works for the welfare of his fellow men. Man lives freely only by his readiness to die, if need be, at the hands of his brother, never by killing him. Man often becomes what he believes himself to be. If I keep on saying to myself that I cannot do a certain thing, it is possible that I may end by really becoming incapable of doing it. On the contrary, if I have the belief that I can do it, I shall surely acquire the capacity to do it even if I may not have it at the beginning. Man should forget his anger before he lies down to sleep. Morality is contraband in war. Morality is the basis of things, and truth is the substance of all morality. My life is my message. My religion is based on truth and non-violence. Truth is my God. Non-violence is the means of realizing Him. No culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. Nobody can hurt me without my permission. Non-cooperation with evil is as much a duty as is cooperation with good. Non-violence and truth are inseparable and presuppose one another. Non-violence is not a garment to be put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. Non-violence is the article of faith. Non-violence is the first article of my faith. It is also the last article of my creed. Non-violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. Non-violence requires a double faith, faith in God and also faith in man. Non-violence, which is the quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. Peace is its own reward. Poverty is the worst form of violence. Power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment and the other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived. Prayer is the key of the morning and the bolt of the evening. Satisfaction lies in the effort, not in the attainment. Full effort is full victory. Service which is rendered without joy helps neither the servant nor the served. But all other pleasures and possessions pale into nothingness before service which is rendered in a spirit of joy. Strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. The day the power of love overrules the love of power, the world will know peace. The difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would suffice to solve most of the world's problem. The good man is the friend of all living things. The greatness of a nation can be judged by the way its animals are treated. The law of sacrifice is uniform throughout the world. To be effective, it demands the sacrifice of the bravest and the most spotless. The main purpose of life is to live rightly, think rightly, act rightly. The soul must languish when we give all our thought to the body. The only tyrant I accept in this world is the still voice within. The pursuit of truth does not permit violence on one's opponent. There are people in the world so hungry, that God cannot appear to them except in the form of bread. There is a sufficiency in the world for man's need but not for man's greed. There is more to life than increasing its speed. Those who know how to think need no teachers. Those who say religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion is. To believe in something, and not to live it, is dishonest. To deprive a man of his natural liberty and to deny to him the ordinary amenities of life is worse than starving the body. It is starvation of the soul, the dweller in the body. Truth is by nature self-evident. As soon as you remove the cobwebs of ignorance that surround it, it shines clear. Truth never damages a cause that is just. Truth stands, even if there be no public support. It is self-sustained. Violent men have not been known in history to die to a man. They die up to a point. We may never be strong enough to be entirely non-violent in thought, word, and deed. But we must keep non-violence as our goal and make strong progress towards it. We should meet abuse by forbearance. Human nature is so constituted that if we take absolutely no notice of anger or abuse, the person indulging in it will soon weary of it and stop. What difference does it make to the dead, the orphans, and the homeless, whether the mad destruction is wrought under the name of totalitarianism or the holy name of liberty or democracy? What we are doing to the forests of the world is but a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another. Whatever you do may seem insignificant to you, but it is most important that you do it. When I despair, I remember that all through history the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time, they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of tall ways. Where love is, there God is also. Where there is love there is life. You can chain me, you can torture me, you can even destroy this body, but you will never imprison my mind. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values. Your values become your destiny. The future depends on what you do today. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Peaceman in World War II Germany. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, February 4, 1906 to April 9, 1945, fought for peace, justice against the repressive government in World War II Germany. He was a German Lutheran pastor, theologian, and founding member of the Confessing Church. He said Christians should participate in the secular world to fight for goodness. His book was The Cost of Discipleship. en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dietrich_Bonhoeffer. dbonheffer.org. We must learn to regard people less in the light of what they do or omit to do, and more in the light of what they suffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Letters and Papers from Prison. Cheap grace is the grace we bestow on ourselves. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Music will help dissolve your perplexities and purify your character and sensibilities, and in time of care and sorrow, will keep a fountain of joy alive in you. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. We are not to simply bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice, we are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. Jesus himself did not try to convert the two thieves on the cross, he waited until one of them turned to him. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Letters and Papers from Prison. There is nothing that can replace the absence of someone dear to us, and one should not even attempt to do so. One must simply hold out and endure it. At first that sounds very hard, but at the same time it is also a great comfort. For to the extent the emptiness truly remains unfilled, one remains connected to the other person through it. It is wrong to say that God fills the emptiness. God in no way fills it, but much more leaves it precisely unfilled, and thus helps us preserve even in pain the authentic relationship. Furthermore, the more beautiful and full the remembrances, the more difficult the separation. But gratitude transforms the torment of memory into silent joy. One bears what was lovely in the past not as a thorn but as a precious gift deep within, a hidden treasure of which one can always be certain. By judging others we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to its children. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. When all is said and done, the life of faith is nothing if not an unending struggle of the spirit with every available weapon against the flesh. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies. At the end all his disciples deserted him. On the cross he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause he had come, to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian, too, belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life but in the thick of foes. There is his commission, his work. The kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies. And he who will not suffer this does not want to be of the kingdom of Christ, he wants to be among friends, to sit among roses and lilies, not with the bad people but the devout people. O you blasphemers and betrayers of Christ! If Christ had done what you are doing, who would ever have been spared? Luther. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Life Together, The Classic Exploration of Christian Community. In normal life we hardly realize how much more we receive than we give, and life cannot be rich without such gratitude. It is so easy to overestimate the importance of our own achievements compared with what we owe to the help of others. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Letters and Papers from Prison. If you board the wrong train, it is no use running along the corridor in the other direction. In a word, live together in the forgiveness of your sins, for without it no human fellowship, least of all a marriage, can survive. Don't insist on your rights, don't blame each other, don't judge or condemn each other, don't find fault with each other, but accept each other as you are, and forgive each other every day from the bottom of your hearts. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Letters and Papers from Prison. We must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son, yet were bought at a price, and what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered him up for us. Costly grace is the incarnation of God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. A God who let us prove his existence would be an idol. There is meaning in every journey that is unknown to the traveler. Action springs not from thought, but from a readiness for responsibility. We pray for the big things and forget to give thanks for the ordinary, small, and yet really not small, gifts. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Life Together, The Classic Exploration of Christian Community. I discovered later, and I'm still discovering right up to this moment, that is it only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. By this worldliness I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes, and failures. In so doing we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God, taking seriously, not our own sufferings, but those of God in the world. That, I think, is faith. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Discipleship is not an offer that man makes to Christ. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. Cheap grace means grace sold on the market like cheap Jack's wares. The sacraments, the forgiveness of sin, and the consolations of religion are thrown away at cut prices. Grace is represented as the Church's inexhaustible treasury, from which she showers blessings with generous hands, without asking questions or fixing limits. Grace without price, grace without cost. The essence of grace, we suppose, is that the account has been paid in advance, and, because it has been paid, everything can be had for nothing. Since the cost was infinite, the possibilities of using and spending it are infinite. What would grace be if it were not cheap? Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession, absolution without personal confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. Costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field, for the sake of it a man will go and sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price to buy which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of His Son, yet were bought at a price, and what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon His Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered Him up for us. Costly grace is the incarnation of God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. In ordinary life we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give, and that it is only with gratitude that life becomes rich. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It is only because He became like us that we can become like Him. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. Where God tears great gaps we should not try to fill them with human words. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The most experienced psychologist or observer of human nature knows infinitely less of the human heart than the simplest Christian who lives beneath the cross of Jesus. The greatest psychological insight, ability, and experience cannot grasp this one thing, what sin is. Worldly wisdom knows what distress and weakness and failure are, but it does not know the godlessness of man. And so it also does not know that man is destroyed only by his sin and can be healed only by forgiveness. Only the Christian knows this. In the presence of a psychiatrist I can only be a sick man, in the presence of a Christian brother I can dare to be a sinner. The psychiatrist must first search my heart and yet he never plumbs its ultimate depth. The Christian brother knows when I come to him, here is a sinner like myself, a godless man who wants to confess and yearns for God's forgiveness. The psychiatrist views me as if there were no God. The brother views me as I am before the judging and merciful God in the cross of Jesus Christ. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Life Together, the classic exploration of Christian community. I'm still discovering, right up to this moment, that it is only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes and failures, experiences and perplexities. In so doing, we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Mahagozananda, 1929–2007. Mahagozananda was a Buddhist monk who led peace marches through war zones in Cambodia. Economist.com/obituary/displays tory.cfm ?story_ID =88814988, obituary. Great compassion makes a peaceful heart. A peaceful heart makes a peaceful person. A peaceful person makes a peaceful family. A peaceful family makes a peaceful community. A peaceful community makes a peaceful nation. A peaceful nation makes a peaceful world. If we cannot be happy in spite of our difficulties, what good is our spiritual practice? Walter Wink quotes. Walter Wink, May 21, 1935 to May 10, 2012, was an American Christian activist who fought for nonviolent resistance. His nonviolence work The Third Way said help people, turn the other cheek. His website walterwink.com is gone now. He wrote. Naming the Powers, 1984. Unmasking the Powers, 1986. Engaging the Powers, 1992. When the Powers Fall, 1998. The Powers That Be, 1999. The Powers That Be, Theology for a New Millennium. Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. Jesus and Nonviolence. Engaging the Powers, Discernment and Resistance in a World of Domination. Jesus did not advocate nonviolence merely as a technique for outwitting the enemy, but as a just means of opposing the enemy in such a way as to hold open the possibility of the enemies becoming just as well. Both sides must win. We are summoned to pray for our enemies' transformation, and to respond to ill treatment with a love that not only is godly but also, I am convinced, can only be found in God. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. So many people, if the truth were known, live their lives on two levels. The principles they fight about are often at odds with the complicated and often frustrated lives they live. This is why there is so much intensity. Walter Wink, Homosexuality and Christian Faith, Questions of Conscience for the Churches. The peace the gospel brings is never the absence of conflict, but an ineffable divine reassurance within the heart of conflict, a peace that surpasses understanding. Walter Wink. Violent revolution fails because it is not revolutionary enough. It changes the rulers but not the rules, the ends but not the means. Most of the old androcratic values and delusional assumptions remain intact. Walter Wink, Engaging the Powers, Discernment and Resistance in a World of Domination. Evil can be opposed without being mirrored. Oppressors can be resisted without being emulated. Enemies can be neutralized without being destroyed. Walter Wink. Neutrality in a situation of oppression always supports the status quo. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. Neutrality in a situation of oppression always supports the status quo. Reduction of conflict by means of a phony peace is not a Christian goal. Justice is the goal, and that may require an acceleration of conflict as a necessary stage in forcing those in power to bring about genuine change. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. There is no one, and surely no entire people, in whom the image of God has been utterly extinguished. Faith in God means believing that anyone can be transformed, regardless of the past. To write off whole groups of people as intrinsically racist and violent is to accept the very same premise that upholds racist and oppressive regimes. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. No war today could be called just, given the inevitable level of casualties and atrocities. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. Loving confrontation can free both the oppressed from docility and the oppressor from sin. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. One task the churches can undertake as the nation moves toward democracy is to increase the democracy in church structures themselves, including the ordination of women, the development of more representative and participative styles of church governance, and the repudiation of patriarchy. In many countries, churches cling to traditional authoritarianism, and are a hindrance rather than a help to democratization. It would be a major gift to the world if the churches would at long last condemn domination in all its forms, so that they may more adequately preach and embody Jesus' vision of God's domination-free order. Walter Wink, When the Powers Fall, Reconciliation in the Healing of Nations. In the final analysis, then, love of enemies is trusting God for the miracle of divine forgiveness. If God can forgive, redeem, and transform me, I must also believe that God can work such wonders with anyone. Love of enemies is seeing one's oppressors through the prism of the reign of God not only as they now are but also as they can become, transformed by the power of God. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. An egalitarian society presupposes nonviolence, for violence is the way some are able to deprive others of what is justly theirs. Inequality can only be maintained by violence. The root of violence, moreover, is domination. Walter Wink, When the Powers Fall, Reconciliation in the Healing of Nations. The failure of churches to continue Jesus' struggle to overcome domination is one of the most damning apostasies in its history. With some thrilling exceptions, the churches of the world have never yet decided that domination is wrong. Walter Wink, When the Powers Fall, reconciliation in the healing of nations. Harboring enmity and seeking revenge only perpetuates the power of oppressors to lord it over their victims long after the deed was done. Thus, at the most fundamental level, forgiveness spells liberation for the victim. Walter Wink, When the Powers Fall, Reconciliation in the Healing of Nations. I cannot really be open to the call of God in a situation of oppression if the one thing I have excluded as an option is my own suffering and death. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. Jesus abhors both passivity and violence as responses to evil. Walter Wink, Jesus and Nonviolence, A Third Way. The War Prayer by Mark Twain. It was a time of great and exalting excitement. The country was up in arms, the war was on, in every breast burned. The holy fire of patriotism, the drums were beating, the bands playing, the toy pistols popping, the bunched firecrackers hissing and spluttering, on every hand. And far down the receding and fading spread of roofs and balconies, a fluttering wilderness of flags flashed. In the sun, daily the young volunteers marched down the white avenue gay and fine in their new uniforms, they proud fathers and mothers and sisters and sweethearts, cheering them with voices choked with happy emotion. As they swung by, nightly the packed mass meetings listened, panting, to patriot oratory which stirred the deepest deeps of their hearts and which they interrupted at briefest intervals with cyclones of applause, the tears running down their cheeks the while, in the churches, the pastors preached devotion to flag and country and invoked the God of battles, beseeching his aid in our good cause, an outpouring of fervid eloquence which moved every listener. It was indeed a glad and gracious time, and the half-dozen rash spirits that ventured to disapprove of the war and cast a doubt upon its righteousness straightway got such a stern and angry warning that for their personal safety's sake they quickly shrank out of sight and offended no more in that way. Sunday morning came. Next day the battalions would leave for the front, the church was filled, the volunteers were there, their young faces alight with martial dreams, visions of the stern advance, the gathering momentum, the rushing charge, the flashing sabers, the flight of the foe, the tumult, the enveloping smoke, the fierce pursuit, the surrender. Then home from the war, bronzed heroes, welcomed, adored, submerged in golden seas of glory. With the volunteers sat their dear ones, proud, happy, and envied by the neighbors and friends who had no sons and brothers to send forth to the field of honor, there to win for the flag, or, falling, to die the noblest of noble deaths. The service proceeded, a war chapter from the Old Testament was read, the first prayer was said, it was followed by an organ burst that shook the building, and with one impulse the house rose, with glowing eyes and beating hearts, and poured out that tremendous invocation. God the all-terrible, thou who ordainest thunder thy clarion and lightning thy sword. Then came the long prayer. None could remember the like of it for passionate pleading and moving and beautiful language. The burden of its supplication was that an ever-merciful and benignant Father of us all would watch over our noble young soldiers, and aid, comfort, and encourage them in their patriotic work, bless them, shield them in the day of battle and the hour of peril, bear them in his mighty hand, make them strong and confident, invincible in the bloody onset, help them to crush the foe, grant to them and to their flag and country imperishable honor and glory. An aged stranger entered and moved with slow and noiseless step up the main aisle, his eyes fixed upon the minister, his long body clothed in a robe that reached to his feet, his head bare, his white hair descending in a frothy cataract to his shoulders, his seamy face unnaturally pale, pale even to ghastliness. With all eyes following him and wondering, he made his silent way. Without pausing he ascended to the preacher's side and stood there waiting. With shut lids the preacher, unconscious of his presence, continued his moving prayer, and at last finished it with the words uttered in fervent appeal. Bless our arms, grant us the victory, O Lord our God, Father and Protector of our land and flag. The stranger touched his arm, motioned him to step aside, which the startled minister did and took his place. During some moments he surveyed the spellbound audience with solemn eyes, in which burned an uncanny light. Then in a deep voice he said, I come from the throne bearing a message from Almighty God. The words smote the house with a shock. If the stranger perceived it, he gave no attention. He has heard the prayer of his servant your shepherd, and will grant it if such be your desire after I, his messenger, shall have explained to you its import, that is to say, its full import. For it is like unto many of the prayers of men, in that it asks for more than he who utters it is aware of, except he pause and think. God's servant and yours has prayed his prayer. Has he paused and taken thought? Is it one prayer? No, it is two, one uttered, the other not. Both have reached the ear of him who heareth all supplications, the spoken and the unspoken. Ponder this, keep it in mind. If you would beseech a blessing upon yourself, beware lest without intent you invoke a curse upon a neighbor at the same time. If you pray for the blessing of rain upon your crop which needs it, by that act you are possibly praying for a curse upon some neighbor's crop which may not need rain and can be injured by it. You have heard your servant's prayer, the uttered part of it I am commissioned of God to put into words. The other part of it, that part which the pastor and also in your hearts fervently prayed silently and ignorantly and unthinkingly, God grant that it was so. You have heard those words, grant us the victory, O Lord our God. That is sufficient. The whole of the uttered prayer is compact into those pregnant words. Elaborations were not necessary. When you have prayed for victory, you have prayed for many unmentioned results which follow. Victory must follow it, cannot help but follow it. Upon the listening Spirit of God the Father fell also the unspoken part of the prayer. He commandeth me to put it into words. Listen. O Lord our Father, our young patriots, idols of our hearts, go forth to battle, be thou near them. With them, in spirit, we also go forth from the sweet peace of our beloved firesides to smite the foe. O Lord our God, help us to tear their soldiers to bloody shreds with our shells, help us to cover their smiling fields with the pale forms of the patriot dead, help us to drown the thunder of their guns with the shrieks of their wounded, writhing in pain, help us to lay waste their humble homes with a hurricane of fire, help us to wring the hearts of their offending widows with unavailing grief, help us to turn them out roofless with their little children to wander unfriended the wastes of their desolated land in rags and hunger and thirst, sports of the sun flames of summer and the icy winds of winter, broken in spirit, worn with travail, imploring thee for the refuge of the grave and denied it. For our sakes who adore thee, Lord, blast their hopes, blight their lives, protract their bitter pilgrimage, make heavy their steps, water their way with their tears, stain the white snow with the blood of their wounded feet. We ask it, in the spirit of love, of him who is the source of love, and who is the ever-faithful refuge and friends of all who are sore beset and seeking his aid with humble and contrite hearts. Amen. The old man paused. Ye have prayed it, if you still desire it, speak. The messenger of the Most High awaits. ************ It was believed afterward that the man was a lunatic, because there was no sense in what he said. Chapter 2. Lists of peace activists. Peace people/peace leaders. From the dead website peacecouncil.org/peace-counselors, triarchive.org. mkgandhi.org/associates/badsha.htm, a movement of Pashto Muslim nonviolence. Nobelprais.org/nobel_prizes/peace/laureates/1984/22-bio.html, desmondtutu.tutu.org, Desmond Tutu Peace Center in South Africa. USIP.org/libraries/tc/doc/L_Salvador/TC_E_S_Salvador3151993 cases D1_2.html assassination of Salvadoran Archbishop Romero in March 1980 USIP.org/libraries/tc_doc/L_salvador/tc_E_S_0315193 El Salvador Truth Commission Report. peacecouncil.org/peacecounselors.html, biographical information. lpj.org/patriarch.htm, biography. And selected public addresses of Monsignor Michel Sabah, Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. sulak-sivaraksa.org/n, Satharak Nagapradeepa Foundation. plumvillage.org/html/ourteacher.html, biography Thich Nhat Hanh, plumvillage.org/html/dharmatalks.html, dharmatalks Thich Nhat Hanh. Vatican.va/holy_fathers/John_Paul_J.P-2/encyclicals/documents/H.F_N.C_J_1051991 John Paul II. Swami Agnivsh. Hindu monk and president of the Arya Samaj, a Hindu reform movement. Dr. Dalal Boubaker. Rector of the Muslim Institute of the Grand Mosque of Paris and President of the French Council of the Muslim Faith, Conseil Français du Culte Musulman. Dr. Elise Boulding. Quaker peace activist. Dr. Hizkias Assafa. African Peacebuilding and Reconciliation Network, Nairobi, Kenya. Rev. Marcus Braybrook. World Congress of Faiths, Three Faiths Forum, London. Senior. Joan D. Chittister, OSB. Women's Global Peace Initiative. Professor Chung Hyun Kyung. Professor of Ecumenics and World Christianity at Union Theological Seminary, New York. H.H. Tenzin Gyatso, 14th Dalai Lama. Exiled spiritual and temporal leader of Tibetans and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1989. Ven. Damananda Bhikkhuni. Buddhist nun. Formerly Associate Professor of Philosophy and Religion, Thammasat University, Bangkok, Thailand. Rev. Gonzalo Bernabe y Tuarte Verduzco, O.P. Dominican friar and priest and prior provincial for Mexico. Father Thomas Keating, OCSO. Cistercian monk and former abbot of St. Joseph's Abbey, Spencer, Massachusetts. Married Maguire. Northern Irish peace activist. Community of the Peace People. Dr. Sulia S. Mahmood Abedin. Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs, London, Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, Oxford. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. International Movement for a Just World, Malaysia. Samdong Rinpoche. Tibetan monk and scholar. Kailan Tripa, Prime Minister, of the Tibetan government in exile. Rev. Desmond M. Tutu. Nobel Prize, 1984. Rabbi Levi Wyman Kelman. Rabbi of a Reform Jewish congregation in Jerusalem called Kehilat Kol Hain Shama. Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism. Rabbis for Human Rights. List of peace activists. Type these names into a search engine. A. J. Must, 1885–1967. Abby Hoffman, 1936–1989. Abdullah Abu Rama. Abby Nathan, 1927–2008. Abraham Joshua Heschel, 1907–1972. Adam Kokesh, born 1982. Adam Yosh, 1964–2012. Adi Roche, born 1955. Ulla Murabit, born 1989. Albert Einstein, 1879–1955. Albert Schweitzer, 1875–1965. Aldous Huxley, 1894–1963. Alex Comfort, 1920–2000. Alfred Fried, 1864–1921. Alfred Maurice de Zayas, born 1947. Ali Abu Awad, born 1972. Allen Ginsberg, 1926–1997. Alma Dolans, 1876. Alan Ware, born 1962. Amy Goodman, born 1957. André Lariviere, born 1948. Andrei Trochmy, 1901–1971. Andrei Sakharov, 1921–1989. Andrew Carnegie, 1835–1919. Anat, 1894–1981. Archibald Baxter, 1881–1970. Eric Asherman, born 1959. Arthur Gish, 1939–2010. Arun Gandhi, born 1934. Arundhati Roy, born 1961. Barbara Grace Tucker. Barry Metcalf, 1930–1986. Benjamin Franklin Trueblood, 1847–1916. Benjamin Spock, 1903–1998. Bernard Lafayette, born 1940. Bernie Sanders, born 1941. Bertha von Suttner, 1843–1914. Bertie Lewis, 1920–2010. Bertrand Russell, 1872–1970. Bob Marley, 1945–1981. Bradford Little, born 1927. Brian Haw, 1949–2011. Brian Wilson, born 1941. Bruce Kent, born 1929. Brian Law, 1954–2013. Carl Sagan, 1934–1996. Karl von Ossietzky, 1889–1938. Carlos Felipe Ximenes Belo, born 1948. Cat Stevens, born 1948. Cesar Chavez, 1927–1993. Chico Mendez, 1944–1988. Cindy Sheehan, born 1957. Coleman McCarthy, born 1938. Comfort Freeman. Concepcion Picciotto, born 1945. Cornelio Samaruga, born 1932. Dalia Ravakovich, 1936–2005. Daisaku Ikeda. Daniel Berrigan, born 1921. Daniel Ellsberg, born 1931. Danny Glover, born 1946. David Courtwright. David Dean Schulman, born 1949. David Dellinger, 1915–2004. David McTaggart, 1932–2001. Desmond Tutu, born 1931. Diana Francis, born 1944. Dick Gregory, born 1932. Dick Shepard, 1880–1937. Donald Soper, 1903–1998. Dorothy Day, 1897–1980. Ed Sanders, born 1939. Edip Yüksel, born 1957. Ellie Ducamern, 1833–1906. Ella Hugh Burritt, 1810–1879. Elizabeth Rodden, 1882–1964. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, born 1938. Ellen Thomas, born 1947. Émile Arnaud, 1864–1921. Emily Green Balch, 1867–1961. Emily Hobhouse, 1860–1926. Emma Goldman, 1869–1940. Emrys Hughes, 1894–1969. Iqbal Ahmed, 1933–34–1999. Ernesto Balducci, 1922–1992. Eugene McCarthy, 1916–2005. Eve Tetaz, born 1931. Evelyn Underhill, 1875–1941. Everett Gendler, born 1928. Ezra Nawi, born 1952. Frandaith, born 1949. Francis Crowe, born 1919. Frederick Passy, 1822–1912. G. Simon Herrick, born 1948. Jean Sharp, born 1928. George Friedrich Nicolai, 1874–1964. George Lansbury, 1859–1940. George McGovern, 1922–2012. Ghassan Andoni, born 1956. Grigoris Lambrikis, 1912–1963. Harry Belafonte, born 1927. Helder Camara, 1909–1999. Helen Caldecott, born 1938. Helen John. Helen Keller, 1880–1968. Helena Cobban, born 1952. Henri Lafontaine, 1854–1943. Henry David Thoreau, 1817–1862. Henry Richard, 1812–1888. Howard Zinn, 1922–2010. Hugh Brock, 1914–1985. James Bevel, 1936–2008. James Kalayani, born 1922. James Gareth Endicott, 1898–1993. James Loney, born 1964. Jane Addams, 1860–1935. Jane Fonda, born 1937. Janet Bloomfield, 1953–2007. Jean Showers, 1859–1914. Jean-Marie Simpson, born 1959. Jeanette Rankin, 1880–1973. Jeff Halper, born 1946. Jeff Charlotte, 1942–1969. Jeremy Corbyn, born 1949. Jerry Rubin, 1938–1994. Jim Forrest, born 1941. Jim Radford. Jimmy Carter, born 1924. Joe Valentine, born 1946. Joan Baez, born 1941. Jody Evans, born 1954. Jody Williams, born 1950. John Lennon, 1940–1980. John McConnell, 1915–2012. John Middleton Murray, 1889–1957. John Paul II. John Wallach, 1943–2002. Jonathan Schell, 1943–2014. Jose Argels, 1939–2011. Jose Brochka, 1891–1950. Jose Ramos Horta, born 1949. Joseph Poloski, 1916–1983. Judith Hand, born 1940. Judy Collins, born 1939. Julia Ward Howe, 1819–1910. Kathleen Tachi Morris, 1899–1993. Kathy Kelly, born 1952. Keir Hardie, 1856–1915. Keith McHenry, born 1957. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, 1890–1988. Khawaja Zafar Iqbal. Kizito Miyago, born 1981. Klas Pontus Arnoldson, 1844–1916. Kurt Vonnegut, 1922–2007. Lanza del Vasto, 1901–1981. Lawrence Overmeyer, born 1957. Lawrence S. Whitner, born 1941. Leo Tolstoy, 1828–1910. Louis Fry Richardson, 1881–1953. Lamech Bowie, born 1972. Lindis Percy, born 1941. Linus Pauling, 1901–1994. Ludwig Kvitta, 1858–1941. Married Maguire, born 1944. Marcus Raskin, born 1934. Margaret Holmes, A.M., 1909–2009. Mark Satin, born 1946. Marshall Rosenberg, 1934–2015. Martin Luther King, Jr. 1929–1968. Martin Niemöller, 1892–1984. Martin Sheen, born 1940. Marty Adasari, born 1937. Medea Benjamin, born 1952. Meg Beresford, born 1937. Mel Duncan, born 1950. Michael Dean Boruff A.M., 1929–2014. Michael Ferber, born 1944. Michael Randall, born 1933. Mikhail Gorbachev, born 1931. Miko Peled, born 1961. Mohammad Sanaun, born 1931. Mohandas Gandhi, 1869–1948. Molly Scott Cato, born 1963. Mordecai Vanunu, born 1954. Myrtle Solomon, 1921–1987. Nancy Shelley, died 2010. Neil Young, born 1945. Nelson Mandela, 1918–2013. Nicholas Roerich. Noam Chomsky, born 1928. Norman Cousins, 1915–1990. Norman Mailer, 1923–2007. Olive Palma, 1927–1986. Oscar Romero, 1917–1980. Otto Hahn, 1879–1968. Owen Wilkes, 1940–2005. Pat Aerosmith, born 1930. Paul Goodman, 1911–1972. Paul Krasner, born 1932. Paul Newman. Paul Oestreicher, born 1931. Peace Pilgrim, 1908–1981. Percy Bysshe Shelley, 1792–1822. Pete Seeger, 1919–2014. Peter Yarrow, born 1938. Phil Donahue. Phil Oakes, 1940–1976. Philip Berrigan, 1923–2002. Philip Noel Baker, 1889–1982. Pierre Cerceli, 1879–1945. Rachel Corey, 1979–2003. Ramji Singh, born 1927. Ramsey Clark, born 1927. Rennie Davis, born 1941. Rigoberta Menchú, born 1959. Romain Roland, 1866–1944. Ron Kovic, born 1946. Samantha Smith, 1972–1985. Sari Nusseibeh, born 1949. Shireen Ebadi, born 1947. Sydney Hinks, 1925–2006. Sydney Lenz, 1912–1986. Sophie Scholl, 1921–1943. Stoughton Lind, born 1929. Stellan Vindhagen, born 1964. Steve Kilalia. Stu Albert, 1939–2006. Suzanne Arms, born 1945. Sybil Morrison, 1893–1984. Sybil Thorndike, 1882–1976. Tadatoshi Akiba, born 1942. Tank Man. Tawakkol Karman, born 1979. Tenzin Gyatso, born 1935. Thich Nht, born 1926. Thomas, 1947–2009. Thomas Lewis, 1940–2008. Thomas Merton, 1915–1968. Tom Cornell. Tom Fox, 1951–2006. Thomas Sick, 1939–2004. Uri Avneri, born 1923. Václav Havel, 1936–2011. Vera Brittain, 1893–1970. Vinoba Bhave, 1895–1982. Vittorio Arrigoni, 1975–2011. Walter Wolfgang, born 1923. Wangari Maathai, 1940–2011. Wavy Gravy, born 1936. Widad Akrai, born 1969. William Ladd, 1778–1841. William Sloane Coffin, 1924–2006. Wilson A. Head, 1914–1993. Woody Guthrie, 1912–1967. Yoko Ono, born 1933.